we had €1 for every time we heard the words traceability and circular economy in these events, we would all by now be very rich and have a lot of money to invest in these issues. The problem is you have to talk about these issues because there's such big ones to solve. Traceability is hard. We have to look back over such a complex supply chain that we have unwittingly made for ourselves. And with the circular economy, we often focus upon post-consumer textiles, post-consumer waste. And at the moment, we're only recycling 1% of this back into new yarn. Of course, lots of textiles are recycled. We're in Prato here today, possibly the birthplace of recycling textiles and especially famous for its wools. But mostly, the recycled yarns that we made today come from the pre-consumer waste, or production leftovers, as we call them. And actually, the recycling of these production leftovers has already created a new circular supply chain. The problem is, this new circular supply chain has zero traceability. Okay, allow me to step aside a little bit and explain a bit more. We were one of the winners of the H&M Global Change Award a couple of years ago, and it really allowed us to push the envelope, trust in our journey a little bit more. And we did a lot of work in China, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, and have done a huge amount of research into production leftovers. And what we realized is there is very little information out there. There are no statistics. There's no statistics on the volumes or the potential of production leftovers. We have seen and measured that at least 25% of all textile fibre produced gets spilled during fabric and garment production. This is a huge resource, so why is there no information on it? Well, there are a couple of reasons, but one of the biggest ones being there's a conflict of business interest between the supplier and the brand. For example, in Bangladesh, we see that 1/4 of all profits comes from the sales of leftovers. And that's not because the prices are high, but because the volumes are big. Okay, you might say, 25%, that's a huge volume of resources, but that's not all waste. Some of that gets circulated. And I would say, yes, that is exactly the point. These production leftovers are getting circulated because they're so much easier to handle and to recycle than all the other textiles at the post-consumer. They are, in fact, the low-hanging fruit of the circular economy. And it's ridiculous because at the moment, we're completely overlooking them and underestimating them. Although some textiles, production leftovers are recycled, a lot go for downcycling, huge amounts go for incineration, both legally and illegally, and the rest is landfilled or dumped. In fact, we have no idea where a huge amount of production leftovers go to. And the problem is we're treating circularity and traceability as two separate projects, and we believe that that is a mistake. So, we have created this circular supply chain. But at the moment, each of the stakeholders are separated with their own individual problems and needs. Let's go through them one by one. Let's start with the suppliers. The suppliers at the moment, they mix up the leftovers quick and in bulk and sell them on cheap. They're so squeezed on price that often the sales of leftovers become significant to their bottom line. The traders manually sort the textiles by touch and burn. They have no access to fibre information, chemical treatments, what brand these scraps came from. Just by knowing the most basic information, just by knowing fibre composition, for example, could actually revolutionize certain textile recyclings, like polyester recycling. At the moment, our polyester recycled textile comes from plastic bottles and packaging, which is crazy because 60% of the global usage of polyester goes to textiles, not to bottles. And on top of that, polyester is the biggest and fastest growing sector in the textiles market. If we focus the same amount of attention we did on bottles as with the textile fibre, we would be reducing the amount of global supply of polyester by a huge amount. Very little meaningful polyester recycling is done. Anything that for textiles, anything that brings it back to a PET pellet or filament yarn. And why is this? Well, I've spoken to a lot of polyester recyclers, and there's various problems, but the biggest one they cite is feedstock control. At the moment, they want 100% they want 100% polyester, and during our existing trading system, it is impossible to know by touch and burn if a fabric is 100% or if it's a poly blend. And so, this market just really doesn't exist. It's frustrating because there's so much polyester out there, there's so much textiles out there, and we're not really capturing their full potential. Okay, let's look at the brands and their role within this game. It's hard for them. It's really hard for them to know how much production leftovers they're creating and also where they're going to. Brands generally underestimate the volumes of production leftovers they're creating. Normally they estimate between 10 and 12% in total. We see from our research that at garment stage, the total number of leftovers ranges between 14 to 19%. And that doesn't include any mill, spinning, dye leftovers created at other stages. Really interestingly, organisations like WRAP, brands that we're working with, and some brands working independently in the sector are backing us up with our 25% estimate. But we need to keep going, because this underestimation of production leftovers is actually having a much bigger impact on the circular supply chain and the circular economy than we really realise. I've read several articles recently which talk about how we're moving from the information era into the innovation era, and we are in the transition period between the two. It's an interesting concept because in the transition period you take the developments from the previous era and use them to push forward the emergence of the next. So if this is indeed the case, we should be using information to drive innovation. Information. It's a word I will use a lot in this presentation, and it's a word I use a lot in my everyday life. And sometimes when I use the word so many times, I actually forget what it really means. I looked it up the other day in the dictionary, and it means facts provided or learned about something or someone. And I thought, crystal clear, this is great. But actually, there's another level to that, because when somebody provides facts and somebody learns them, there is a connection. There's two people, and there's a connection made between the two of them. And actually, information connects us. Let me give you an example to explain my point. I'll share some personal information with you today. I was introduced today as Nin Castle, but actually, that's not my name. I've been called Nin both personally and professionally, in fact, pretty much by everyone since I was 2 years old. Since my family and my parents called me Ninny and Nincompoop so much that the Nin stuck. For those of you who don't know what a Nincompoop is, it's an endearing way of calling somebody a bit stupid. Now that's embarrassing information, but you're all a lot more likely to remember my name at the end of this talk. And for better or for worse, by knowing that I was once called the Nincompoop, you're all a little bit more connected to me. Information can be embarrassing. It can be depressing if you read a lot of climate change reports, but it can also be motivating and empowering. So let's go back over our segregated supply chain and add some information, add some connections. Let's start with the brands. When brands can access information on their own leftovers, waste that they are creating, it's really, really, really motivating for them because it's linked to them, not as an industry as a whole. And for the first time, they are actively involved in the circular economy. And we all know when we are actively involved in a project, we are so much more motivated for its success. It's also motivating because brands are already being circular, but they can't see it. They don't know where and how. If they could access information of their own leftovers, where they were already being circulated, see which fibres they are already closing the loop with, it would be incredibly motivating and empowering. With this information, we can also set up KPIs, so they can track where the flows are going from to which recycler or which is an unknown destination, and they can have a benchmark to start improving. Knowing where leftovers flowing, as I said, creates this connection between the brand and the recycler that's actually missing at the moment, and brands are really keen to buy fabrics which contain their own leftovers. And with this better connection between the brand and the recycler, we create a better situation for the supplier. The factories are actually motivated to get the information moving. They actually become smart, proactive providers of leftovers. And by getting the information moving, it opens up so many opportunities for them to earn more from their leftovers. For example, remanufacturing. And by remanufacturing, I mean the reusing of these cut-end bits, these roll-end bits, these bits of fabric from the range about 1/2 yard to 5 yards or so. These generally at the moment get bundled up and sold off cheap in bulk with the cutting scraps. But they could be used in following purchase orders if there was a system to help do it. We worked with a denim factory recently that estimated that by using these roll-end pieces, they could actually reduce their total consumption of virgin fibre by 6%. Suppliers are also motivated to start segregating and putting tracking codes on their scraps. And segregating and putting codes on scraps does not decrease efficiency in the cutting room, but it does increase the potential to earn more from the leftovers, and it also increases the potential to create better relationships with the brands that they're doing business with. And all of this, in turn, empowers the traders. The traders, for the first time, have access to fibre and fabric information. They can offer so much better, more efficient matchmaking. And amazingly, it can also create this industry that's actually really black market run by organised crime, and it can legalise it, creating transparent contracts with suppliers on one side and recyclers on the other. Legalising a whole part of the section of this supply chain, upskilling workers and improving their rights. And all of this in turn makes life easier for the recyclers. The recyclers can get exactly what they want. A market can be properly set up for fibres like polyester, and existing markets like cotton can be improved. We could save loads of money by not having to do so much chemical testings and so on and so forth. There's a lot of textile recyclers here today with a lot more knowledge about how information could drive innovation within their sector. Our research so far has been mainly focused on the cottons and polyesters and in Asia, although we've just started working with Made By under the European Clothing Action Plan. And we're seeing a lot of differences and similarities between Europe and Asia. Europe doesn't have such a big conflict of business interests as we see in Asia, which could create a brilliant competitive advantage for Europe, because we could get information to flow so much faster, and this would be incredibly attractive to brands. Asia, on the other hand, has the volumes. The volumes are going to drive this recycling industry forward. But wherever you are located, and whether you're making fabric or garment, there always seems to be some kind of income coming in from the leftovers. And we realise that if we need to get information moving, we need to not only protect this second margin, but also increase the earnings from it. And that's exactly what our software has been designed to do. So what is it that we're doing, and how do we do it? Well, basically we map production fabrics. How much fabric or fibre was used, how many leftovers and types and volumes were created. We essentially create a way to organise leftovers so that suppliers can earn more money from them. The software works as a waste inventory system and helps manage, organise fabric balance. It's a free software. It's a free software because we want to create a viral spread to trigger a big database. And with this big database, we can use blockchain technology and create from this information data intelligence. And with this data intelligence, we want to empower and create win-win business cases for every single actor around the circular supply chain to connect them. The software is currently being designed and created for garment section, but we're beginning to work in mills as well, tracking mill waste back to spinners and back round again. And this actually happens a lot within vertically integrated factories because it saves a lot of money. And it is happening between independent factories and spinners as well. But there's no system to help scale it up and make this less work and more beneficial. And on top of that, there's no system to prove or to show the circularity. And this proof is really, really useful and important to brands. There are so many brands signing up and making circularity and zero waste commitments at the moment. H&M, 100% circular and renewable by 2030. Inditex, zero waste to landfills 2020 and $3.5 million invested. There are now 207 brands signed up this year to the Copenhagen Fashion Summit 2020 commitments on circularity. So, this is amazing. This is just what the industry needs. This is what we all need. And these brands are making these really amazing commitments, but often they don't quite know, they haven't got a clear picture in how they're going to get there yet. And they're looking for innovations, they're looking for suppliers to help them in this journey. And the solutions are arriving. We've got some amazing technologies arriving to help with the sorting and the tagging to solve our problems of post-consumer waste. And we also have some incredible technologies for recycling blended fabrics that are coming out of the lab and being scaled up. And even these fabrics, even these technologies that won't have the feedstock control as most of our existing recycling technologies do, even these need our help during the scaling process in creating good connections with the brands. It's really looking like we're going to have an explosion of recycling technologies and a big increase in the recycling industry. And we need to make sure we don't make the same mistake again with traceability. We need to set up a good traceability system now so that we can use it to help our certification and auditing process. Essentially, this back end of the industry is going to become the front end of the circular industry. And we have the most amazing opportunity right now to create traceability for the circular economy. Getting information to flow does not just have sustainable benefits. No matter where you are within the supply chain, you can create a competitive advantage. You can earn more from your leftovers. You can forge better relationships with the companies that you do business with. And you can be actively involved in pushing the industry from the information era to the innovation era, where we can create the technologies needed to stop our overconsumption of resources and move forward to a clean, circular and efficient textiles industry. It's closer than we sometimes think. Thank you very much.